In the TV series A Game of Thrones, or the books in the series A Song of Ice and Fire, which is the series of books Game of Thrones is based off of, history repeats itself all the time. Usually not an exact same mirror image of history, but it resonates enough with previous events that we recognize it. For example, in season 7, we have Daenerys arriving to her ancestral home on Dragonstone and attempting to conquer Westeros with 3 dragons. I mean, Aegon's conquest wasn't exactly plagued with White Walkers and was a little more complex in its own right. Daenerys' conquest actually did resonate with the history of Aegon's conquest, not just because she's a Targaryen that's conquering the same continent with 3 dragons, which is the same number of dragons Aegon had. It's more complex than that. So let's look into it. Targaryen, yes. 3 dragons, yes. Based off of Dragonstone, yes. House Tyrell being amongst Daenerys' allies was the same case for Aegon. After Aegon killed the last of House Gardner and the Gardner Kings, he raised up their stewards, the Tyrells, and named them Wardens of the South and Lords of High Garden. So for the Tyrells to join Daenerys, it's just another thing that resonates with Aegon's conquest. In Aegon's conquest, House Gardner and House Lannister joined their forces, the Reach and the West, to form the biggest army men had ever seen. They gathered south of the Blackwater Rush near what we know now as the Gold Road, but it was by Aegon, his sisters, and their dragons and a ground force that House Gardner was obliterated and the Lannisters ran back inside their rock. By what we know today, only as the Field of Fire. In season 7, we got kind of the same thing. In almost the same location, Lannister and Tarly forces were leading the loot from High Garden to King's Landing. At the time Daenerys attacked them, they were south of the Blackwater Rush, just like with Aegon's conquest.
We need to get the last of these wagons over the Blackwater Rush before nightfall.
They were obliterated by Daenerys, Drogon, and the Dothraki in what would be known as the Loot Train Attack or the Field of Fire 2.0, if you're fancy. One of Aegon's first battles, however, Aegon wasn't even there. It was a sea battle known today as the Battle off of Galltown. Aegon's fleet was sent to take Galltown, but off the water of Galltown, Aegon's fleet was defeated by House Aaron's fleet and a dozen Braavosi warships, which is very similar to what happened to Daenerys when she sent Yara Greyjoy's fleet to Dorne to ferry the Dornishmen up the Blackwater. And Daenerys' fleet was defeated by Euron Greyjoy. Also, there was the king who knelt, Torrhen Stark, King of the North. Although Torrhen's brother, Brandon Snow, was completely against him kneeling and would much rather kill the dragons, Torrhen Stark took off his crown and kneeled as King of the North and rose as Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North. So we saw Sansa, of course, Jon's sister, not agreeing with him treating with Daenerys Targaryen, Jon going to Dragonstone anyway, and Jon eventually bending the knee, much like his ancestor. So we have many things that happen in season 7 that resonate or rhyme with Aegon's conquest, even though things weren't exactly the same. Aegon never conquered Dorne, but Daenerys came to play with Dorne already amongst her allies. Aegon burned House Hoare at Harrenhal, which is basically a branch of Greyjoys. Daenerys came into the fold with the Greyjoy fleet, Yara and Theon already as one of her allies. History has repeated itself many times. If we look at the things that happened in Slaver's Bay, the Giscari Empire, known as Old Geese, is an ancient empire older than Valyria. However, the Harpy and the dragon would battle time and time again, the dragon winning every time. And just like her ancestors before her, Daenerys would indeed conquer Slaver's Bay and trample Meereen, Astapor, and Yunkai into the dust. Cersei has been compared previously to Maegor the Cruel, and as of late, the Mad King. Now, what Cersei did in season 6 was history repeating itself. Before the Sept of Baelor was built, there was a Sept of Remembrance. During the reign of Maegor the Cruel, he was opposed by the Faith Militant. One morning, the warrior son, or what we know as the Faith Militant, basically, gathered in the Sept of Remembrance for their morning prayers. Maegor mounted his dragon, Balerion, and bathed the Sept of Remembrance and Dragonfire. Where the Sept once stood, now stands the Dragon Pit. Cersei, not having a dragon, she did the next best thing. She used wildfire and blew up the Sept of Baelor, the High Sparrow, and the little sparrows along with him. Tyrion, the clever Lannister, devises the plan to take Casterly Rock from his family through a hidden entrance he used to sneak whores into the castle. Lan, the clever and ancient ancestor of Tyrion, uses a cleft, a secret passage, to sneak into Casterly Rock and swindle it from the Casterlys. Another resonation with history. Aegon the Unworthy and Robert Baratheon seem like the same wrinkle in the sheets of two histories. Aegon the Unworthy had tons of bastards, some he legitimized on his deathbed, naming them great bastards, which led to the Blackfyre rebellions. Robert Baratheon had tons of bastards, none that he legitimized, although Ned did write his deathbed letter differently than Robert's words.
To rule in my stead until my son Joffrey comes of age.
That would eventually lead to the War of Five Kings, with Robert Baratheon's brothers claiming the throne to usurp the bastard of House Lannister, Joffrey Baratheon. History repeating itself. The young dragon was the first-born son of Aegon III. His father died when he was 14. At 14, he would do what no man ever did and conquer Dorne. He proved to be a great military commander, but his undoing would come while he treated with Dorne under a peace banner. Who does this remind you of? Who does the young dragon remind you of? I'll tell you, the young wolf. The young wolf, Robb Stark, the oldest son of Ned Stark, never lost a battle. He was proven to be a great military commander at age 15, capturing the Kingslayer, and his undoing would come while under a peace banner in the hall of his ally Walder Frey. He was given guest right and slaughtered. If I was to go through every time in history in this series where something repeated itself that happened previously, we would be here all day and probably all night, to be honest. In the words of Mark Twain, history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So basically, past events rhyme or resonate with present and future events. In our story, we have several quotes from characters that explain exactly this, which is the way the author is conveying this history repetition to his audience. Oh, surely, it all goes back to back, Tyrion thought, to our mothers and fathers and theirs before them. We are puppets dancing on the strings of those who came before us, and one day our own children will take up our strings and dance in our steeds. Have you ever seen the arms of House Toland of Ghost Hill? He had to think a moment. A dragon eating its own tail. The dragon is time. It has no beginning and no ending, so all things come around again. You must lend me Harrig's book, Nuncle. She would need to learn all she could of the Kingsmoot before she reached Old Wick. You may read it here. It is old and fragile. He studied her, frowning. Archmaester Rigney once wrote that history is a wheel, for the nature of a man is fundamentally unchanging. What has happened before will perforce happen again, he said. So now that we have established history repeating itself, or at least rhyming with itself, what does that mean for the future? Well, it could mean everything. There are a few important events that to me feel central to the story that's still left to tell. The Long Night feels central, the Tower of Joy and all things Robert's Rebellion, and the Dance of Dragons kind of feel central to me. In the books, things have a lot more time to play out, a little more fulfilled, but in the show, I think they did a good job with resonating with history given the limited time they have to tell a big story like this. Right now, there are basically 3 teams in a game. Team Jon and Daenerys, Team Cersei, and Team Night King. And each team has tons of individual moving pieces. Cersei has made it clear that she's not helping to deal with the Night King, so that is leaving Team Jon and Daenerys to deal with that on their own, while also launching her own rebellion against the last Targaryens, which resonates with Robert's Rebellion. What makes it even resonate more with Robert's Rebellion is this. Cersei is bringing the Golden Company to Westeros to fight for her. Now, at first, this might not seem anything like Robert's Rebellion, but this is just a first glance. So think about it. In the books, the fact that the Golden Company will take Storm's End, and a castle that looks like Storm's End was scouted by production, so we have Cersei in control of the Stormlands, a host at Storm's End leading a rebellion against the last Targaryens. Sounds like Robert to me. Now, we know if my prediction is correct, it won't be an exact mirror, but it will rhyme. The first battle of Robert's rebellion occurred in the Vale of Arryn, and just like Aegon's conquest as well, it was in Gulltown. Basically, the bannermen of the Vale were split on whose side to choose, and a battle broke out. This could easily happen in Season 8. We have Jan Royce in Winterfell. He seems to be the voice of the Vale since Sweet Robin is nowhere to be found. But Jan Royce, he wasn't happy about siding with the Targaryen.
I remember the Mad King all too well. A Targaryen cannot be trusted.
So there could be some defiance from a Targaryen rule in the Vale. There was the Battle of Summerhall, which is basically like the Vale. Not everyone chose to rebel against the Targaryens. People were split, which people in the Stormlands may not choose to side with Cersei. She was Robert's queen. Robert is dead. Her children are dead. Some in the Stormlands may just despise her, not only for all the rumors they've heard through the years, but because she has brought sellswords to their shores and they've taken Storm's End. So some may hate the Targaryens just as Robert did. The Battle of Summerhall may be relived with a siege on Storm's End during Season 8. Like, there's so many possibilities. We have the Battle of Ashford and the Battle of the Bells. The Battle of the Bells to me is important because around this time something significant happened that set out the course of this story. And basically this is where Ned Stark and Jon Arryn married Lysa Tully and Catelyn Stark to gain support of the River Lords. It's not going to be the exact, it's just going to rhyme. There will need to be some marriages arranged for Cersei to gain support or for Jon to gain support. Either way, it could go either way. It could be her own marriage to Euron. It could be a proposal that she offers to one of her supporters, and it could have to do with her brothers, whether they consent to it or not. It's murky and could even be pointing towards a double marriage in the north, with Arya and Sansa having to marry someone in order to secure the help that Jon needs to defeat the Night King. Like, we just don't know how this is going to play out. It's going to rhyme. It won't be the same. That brings me to the greatest battle of all. If you think about the greatest battle of all, who do you think of? Like, the fight you've heard the most about during the show, reading the books, what does it all go back to? Let me tell you. For me, it's the Battle of the Trident. So how will it play out? Jon and Daenerys are a thing. They had boat sex, and it was heavily foreshadowed last season that Daenerys would indeed be pregnant this season. We know Rhaegar left the Tower of the Joy. He left Lyanna there to meet Robert on the Trident and was killed by a blow from his warhammer. So Dorne, it seems like a place to go when you're facing a horrid winter. It's warm in Dorne, but then again, Jon isn't going to run to Dorne, so Jon and Daenerys' Tower of Joy could be somewhere else. Maybe because Daenerys is pregnant, much like Lyanna, Jon will want to keep her safe and away from the fighting. The final battle between the Night King and possibly Cersei as well will take place in the Riverlands. And if not the God's Eye, what better place than the Ruby Ford on the Trident? Jon Snow and the Night King in single combat while the green-blue waters of the Trident rush around them. But things might not end the same way you might think. Things may not end with Jon dying with rubies flying from his breastplate while he whispers Daenerys' name with his dying breath, because history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. Which brings me to the dream Daenerys had. That night she dreamt that she was Rhaegar, riding to the Trident, but she was mounted on a dragon, not a horse. When she saw the usurper's rebel hosts across the river, they were armored all in ice. But she bathed them in dragon fire, and they melted away like dew and turned the Trident into a torrent. Some small part of her knew that she was dreaming, but another part exulted. This is how it was meant to be. The other was a nightmare, and I have only now awakened. So Daenerys may very well be held up somewhere heavy with child. She could come to the Trident and bathe the men armored in ice and dragon fire. She dreamt it. Therefore, it must be true.
I'm no ordinary woman. My dreams come true.
Now, something that's way sadder and way more heartbreaking is that Jon defeats the Night King, but is killed by Cersei's forces on the Trident, and Daenerys dies while giving birth and passes her baby to someone, Tyrion and Sansa, Arya, Bran, I don't know, and says, "Promise me." Or Varys switches Jon and Daenerys' baby with a pisswater prince so Cersei can't kill it, and it's exiled with a John Cunnington type of character, which may be Tyrion or Samwell Tarly, and this whole thing starts over, and now there's a baby, and this baby is the last Targaryen that doesn't know who his real parents are. Again, if that happens, that would actually be heartbreaking. I don't want to see that happen. But I actually think the final dance between the Night King and Jon and Daenerys and everyone else will resonate more with the Dance of Dragons and Robert's Rebellion. There will be single dragon combat, dragon fighting dragon above the God's Eye, fighting on the Trident, and Daenerys arriving at the last minute to bait the usurper's host that's armored in ice with dragon fire. But what do you think? I'm curious to know. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks to everyone that supports me on Patreon. Please give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Please click that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and join the Sweet Summer family. Okay, my sweet summer children, have a good day.